One of the reasons why I love studying the Arctic is that it is kind of an early warning system for the effects of climate change to lower latitudes.
That's Emily Choy, the newest Royal Canadian Geographical Society Explorer-in-Residence. We're very happy to have her as our guest on this episode of Explore, a Canadian Geographic podcast. I'm your host, David McGuffin. Welcome to all you explorers out there, armchair and in motion. The sound you're hearing right there is thousands of murres, a seabird nesting high up on the cliffs of Coates Island, a rocky outcrop of land sitting like an undersized cork at the top of Hudson's Bay. I'm thrilled today to be talking with Emily Choy. As well as being the newest RCGS Explorer-in-Residence, she's also an award-winning researcher based out of McGill University, studying the impacts of climate change in the Arctic with a specific focus on murres. Emily spends her summer researching these fascinating birds, which are something like a cross between a penguin and a puffin, with an incredible ability to swim deep in Arctic waters, hunting for fish. But before we get to our conversation with Emily, this podcast is dropping on Giving Tuesday, and I would love to get your support for Canadian Geographic Magazine by making a donation to the Royal Canadian Geographical Society. There's literally no other magazine like Canadian Geographic, not only in Canada, but anywhere in the world. Every issue is packed with award-winning articles and photography about Canada, its people, the land, the environment, and wildlife. And it comes with maps. Who doesn't love maps? I love maps. It's entirely unique, and it needs your help. You can donate by texting the word GIVE to this number, 613-704-5963. Just wait for a text back with instructions. All your donations will be matched by RCGS fellow Ted Meehan and the Ted Meehan Foundation. And Ted, if you're listening out there, thank you so much for doing this. And thanks to all of you for any support you can give to. It's money well spent for a worthy cause, trust me. And now, on to our interview with Emily Choy. Emily Choy, welcome to the Explore podcast.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here today.
I also want to say congratulations, I guess, on a couple of fronts. One, you're the newest RCGS Explorer-in-Residence, so congrats on that.
Thanks.
And you also have a newborn, I understand, as well. So
thanks.
A whole new realm of exploration there. One of the reasons I love doing this podcast is because it gives me an opportunity to go places and learn about things that I know very little about. And you hit it on two things there, Coates Island and murres, which are a seabird, and the focus of your research. So I'm wondering if you can just take us to Coates Island. Where is it? Describe it. What are you seeing when you're there?
Well, Coates Island is in northern Hudson Bay, Nunavut. So it's a small island. It's below Southampton Island. And so we basically have to reach there. When we do our research, we actually fly a twin otter from Iqaluit to Coates Island. And we're basically dropped off on the beach. Right next to the beach is a colony of about 30,000 breeding pairs of thick-billed murres who spend their summer on Coates Island breeding. They spend their winter off the coast of Newfoundland and Labrador. So once we reach the beach of Coates Island, we actually, our cabins, our campsite, are actually at the top of the seabird cliffs. So we actually have to, on the side next to the beach, it's hilly, it's not very steep, but we actually have to use a pulley to get all of our equipment to the top of the cliffs. Where we basically stay. And then from our cabin, if you walk, several meters out, you can actually see the birds on the cliffs below. And we have this entire kind of ropes course. So we have rock climbers that work with us that set up this course. And we basically have to, sometimes kind of belay down and to work on the birds.
So you're actually belaying down this. How high is this cliff?
About 300 meters. It's pretty high.
That's high. Yeah, that's high. And what's below you?
So what's below is basically, so there's the birds, and then there's basically like Hudson Bay. So lots of rocks in Hudson Bay.
Wow. So fear of heights is not one of your fears.
No.
That's a good thing. So I'd love to hear more about the murres. And you touched on one thing that I found amazing about them is that when they migrate south, they migrate to Labrador and Newfoundland. So we're not talking about the Gulf of Mexico or South America or anything. They're wintering in pretty hardy places, I have to say.
Yes, so they're a cold adapted bird. So when they go and they winter, they stay in waters around 8 degrees Celsius and colder. So they prefer cold climates.
Yeah. So what is it that drew you to study them as a research focus?
Well, I'm very interested in the impacts of climate change on Arctic marine predators, and especially marine predators that are highly adapted to Arctic ecosystems. So thick-billed murres are quite amazing that they're incredible flyers. So they migrate obviously from Newfoundland to Labrador. They spend 4 hours a day flying in order to forage, but they can also dive up to 200 meters. So they're incredible flyers, but they're also divers. And in birds, flying and diving are an energetic trade-off, and it's very difficult to do both. And the perfect example of this is the penguin, who is an amazing diver but has lost its ability to fly over time. Murres do both, but as a result, they spend a lot of energy flying. So they're basically designed to dive, but for some reason they can still fly. So they have these huge energy demands, which are quite incredible.
That's fascinating. And so can you just describe them a bit, what they look like? And is there a bird you could compare them to that people might know more?
Sure. So they're about, just over 1 kilogram in weight. And they basically look very similar to a penguin. So they're black. They're black and white. And they're about like a 1 foot high, but they look very similar to a penguin, but they can fly. Or a puffin, a really large puffin.
Right. Are they the same family as the puffin?
So they're elsids. They're very similar to puffins.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry for my non-scientific
No
labeling. I know there's much more precise things in the world you are in. So tell me, okay, I want to get to the impact of climate change, but I just want to describe when you're doing your research and you're belaying down on ropes down these cliff faces. I mean, what's that experience like? It's 30,000 birds clinging to the sides of this cliff and nests. What's that like?
Yeah, no, so it's quite amazing. So as part of the daily tasks for monitoring the birds. So first of all, the program is quite amazing because it's been going on for about 30 years. And as part of our daily tasks, we each have a kind of a site on the cliffs where we take, 8 counts. We look to see whether there's new chicks. We look to see, often or almost always, the same adults will actually return to the same spot on the cliffs to lay their nests. So we always, check for new birds. And, on my site, there was basically kind of like a ropes course to get there. But then there was a spot where I actually had to rappel about 15 meters to get to my spot. And these birds, so this program has been going on for so long that some of these birds are actually used to people. So
right.
I'm about, when I'm doing my counts, I'm about, sometimes about, a couple feet away from a murre, and they are not afraid of us. They're quite used to us. And so it's quite amazing. Often there are beluga that swim by the island. So there's like a pod of beluga. Like one day we had about 200 beluga just swim by, mostly mothers and calves. And there's also a walrus colony. So interestingly, one of the animals that will actually prey opportunistically on the murres are walrus. Wow. And there is a big walrus haul-out near Coates Island where, one day we were there and there were about 200 walrus just kind of suntanning, just kind of sleeping in this haul-out. So there's lots of interesting animals. Another predator of the birds is polar bears, which it's quite amazing. They'll actually climb parts of the cliffs to get at the birds and eat their eggs.
Wow. Yeah. Do you have a good polar bear story for yourself?
I don't, because when I was last there, there weren't many. Well, fortunately, we didn't run into that many bears. So it wasn't a big polar bear year in 2019. We saw a few, but there have been incidents with bears, and basically once the sea ice melts or breaks up, then they come onto coats and start feeding on the murres instead of their typical prey like seals. And
Wow. So it sounds like just a starkly beautiful place with some incredible wildlife. I'm just wondering, obviously, climate change is a big concern now, and I think anyone who's paying any attention at all knows the Arctic is getting hammered the hardest by climate change and the impact of climate change. So what are you seeing in terms of the murre and the impact on them?
So we're seeing several effects of climate change on the murres. Well, first of all, we're very lucky that the Coates Island population is very stable, so it's healthy right now. There's many populations across the Atlantic and Greenland and Iceland that are actually under decline, which is believed to be due to environmental change and climate change. But we are finding changes in the murre colony. So over the past 30 years, the diets of murres have shifted from about 50% Arctic cod to 50% capelin with the warming of Hudson Bay. And this shift is actually believed to have caused a decline in chick growth. So murre parents will bring back about one fish at a time to their chicks. And because of the smaller size of capelin relative to cod, it's believed that this change in diet has caused a decline in growth rates based on long-term monitoring data. So that's one effect, that shifts in the prey.
Rising water temperatures is making the cod move away, or do you know what the reason for the shift is?
Yes. So Arctic cod is well known to be very sensitive to warming temperatures. And they're either, we're not sure what's happening to the cod. I mean, they're either, moving more northwards, but they are very sensitive to warming temperatures. But it's also bringing in, more Atlantic species such as capelin, like with the warmer water into Hudson Bay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. As you should say, it's a smaller fish, so not ideal, I guess, in some ways.
No.
Huh. Yeah. And in terms of what you understand from what's going on in Greenland and Iceland and the drop in the populations, what is the theory behind that?
Yes. So, yes, definitely climate change, marine ecosystem change, and possibly changes in the diet. But interestingly, another aspect of climate change that I'm currently studying is the impacts of heat stress. So I just had a paper published this summer, in which I'd done work in 2019 to look at the heat tolerance of murres, so how sensitive they are to warming temperatures, and we found that they are one of the most sensitive birds to Arctic warming. And this work actually stemmed from previous observations that murres at Coates during warm weather years were dying on their nests due to heat stress. So interestingly, murres are a seabird in which both parents will actually incubate their eggs. So those males and females will spend 12-hour shifts incubating their eggs, sometimes in full sun. And then there were reports of murres dying on their nests. So in terms of the populations in Greenland, what we've heard from our colleagues is that there have been declines on certain sides of the cliff. So murres, they've found that murres that were in more kind of sunny locations were under decline. So there is kind of some suspicion that Arctic warming could be an effect or could be a cause to some of the declines, but more work needs to be done to see what in fact the declines are caused by in Greenland.
Yeah. And in terms of estimates on temperatures where it really does become a struggle for them, do you know what that is? Or?
Well, murres displayed signs of heat stress in my study at temperatures as low as 21 degrees Celsius.
Oh, wow.
And in fact, the temperatures in which the murres died on their nests at Coates were about 21 and 22 degrees. They were also the murres that were more likely to be affected were also in full sun. So another aspect to consider is that they're black and they heat up more quickly. But we find that at mild temperatures, they exhibit signs of heat stress.
I mean, you've talked about adaptation in terms of switching to the different kinds of food that they eat or the type of fish they eat. Are you seeing other forms of adaptation?
Another aspect of the murres that we are looking at is their use of foraging habitat. And there's a PhD student in my lab named Alison Patterson who's been doing some work on that. So, there is some possibility that the murres might be changing their foraging locations, but, that kind of work is still in progress.
I mean, it just sounds like this is a big picture solution that we need really to help the murres. And there's no local solution on Coates Island. This is all of us need to do a better job in cutting down our carbon footprint and that all around the world.
Yeah, well, I mean, murres and other Arctic species, one of the reasons why I love studying the Arctic is that it is kind of an early warning system for the effects of climate change to, lower latitudes. And, murres are kind of like a canary in the coal mine for impacts of climate change to potentially more temperate species. And in particular, with the heat waves that we've had during the summer, the impacts of heat stress on murres could be potential signs of the impacts of climate change and heat on other species in temperate regions across Canada.
One of the things I love to do when I do these interviews too is just find out where the inspiration came. And can you tell me a bit about where you grew up and what were your parents up to when you were a kid? Where was the nugget of inspiration, do you think?
So I'm from Markham, Ontario, and I grew up. Actually, I spent most of my summers near Lake Simcoe. My grandparents had a cottage, and so I'd spend every summer
Nice.
catching frogs, fishing. I remember catching, garter snakes and northern leopard frogs, and there was always, carp to catch. Like I remember, I got really good as a kid catching. I could never catch the really real big sports fish like walleye and largemouth bass, but I used to always put bread on my hook and catch carp, and some of them would be, it could be like 10 pounds, and
They get big.
they get big, and all the fishermen would see when I would haul one in as a kid, they would think I'd had this big sports fish, but it was just a carp. There was just, I just would spend hours and hours just outside during the summer as part of my childhood and just observing, nature, chickadees, but also I actually had a damselfly hospital, so I was interested in dragonflies and damselflies too. But just all this observation really generated kind of a real interest in the natural world, feeding chipmunks and chickadees. And so I developed a real love of nature through my grandparents' cottage. And I knew ever since I was really young that I wanted to be a zoologist and study animals, but I never thought I'd end up working in the Arctic. And so I just had the opportunity to work in the Arctic during my master's. I did a project on Cape Vera, Devon Island, up in the high Arctic, and just was captivated by the landscape of wildlife. I saw Arctic foxes, I saw polar bears there, and I was just, amazed by this real. It was kind of Cape Vera is kind of an oasis in a polar desert. So again, there's a large seabird colony that deposits a lot of, through their guano, nutrients to the environment. And just below the seabird cliffs are these ponds with a lot of, there's lemmings, there's saxifrage and lichens. And so there's just a little oasis. And then after my master's, I went on to do a PhD on looking at beluga whales as sentinels of environmental change in the Beaufort Sea ecosystem. And I did this work, and this work was part of a community-based monitoring program in partnership with communities in the Nunavut settlement region. And so beluga whales are an important traditional food to many communities in the north. So I had the opportunity to work with community members to monitor the impacts of environmental change on the Beaufort Sea belugas. So it was an amazing experience. I basically lived at harvester camps and learned so much from the Nunavut community members and elders. And then it just led to my postdoc on seabirds. But that was kind of my
Amazing.
journey.
The belugas are just so beautiful, aren't they? They're almost like something created by a Disney animator. They just got a permanent grin on their face, and they're sort of round and happy looking. I don't know, something very captivating about them from a human perspective, I guess.
Yeah, no, I agree. I looked at some of the things I studied were Beaufort Sea belugas have an amazing diving ability, like murres, so they can dive some of them can dive over 1,000 meters, so they are incredible divers. And yes, they're known as actually the canaries of the sea. So they're I didn't study beluga communication, but they just have this wide array of songs and sounds. So they're quite amazing.
Beautiful. How are they? I mean, how are they adapting? What's the prospects for them?
So the Beaufort Sea beluga population is currently, again, it's a healthy population, but they are facing effects of climate change. So with my work, I found that in certain years, the beluga whales had, again, similar to the murres, had switched their diets to capelin. Their main prey, again, is Arctic cod. Arctic cod supports many predators across the Arctic. And so I found that during low cod years, the beluga whales were switching to capelin. And I also found, so based on my work with the communities, many of the community members had been telling the scientists that the whales were getting smaller, and there had been a recent publication by a scientist named Lois Harwood that saw that the over about 20 years, beluga inferred growth rate, so size at age of the whales, was getting smaller over time. So the community members were right that they were getting smaller, and I had found that this declines in condition of the whales could impact their diving ability or dive physiology. And so one of our predictions was that changes in the prey base or declines in Arctic cod could impact the whale's condition, which would impact their diving, which may further worsen their condition. So it could potentially be a vicious cycle.
What gives you hope when you're doing this kind of research? I mean, obviously you're looking sort of very starkly in the face of climate change. Is there things that you find that give you hope?
Yes. So, I thoroughly enjoyed my experience working with community members in the communities in the North. And in fact, I really enjoyed working with local youth from the community. So all of my research assistants from the beluga monitoring program were from youth from Tuktoyaktuk and Inuvik, and many of them have gone on to, I had one youth who went on to be as now an Inuit research advisor for ArcticNet. And so, I think that Arctic research is, it's so important to work with communities in the North. And I'm really seeing that there's a lot of local youth or northern youth that are getting involved that are currently involved in many of these monitoring programs. And I think that really gives me hope for, for the Arctic and for combating climate change. I think with these youth, the Arctic is in good hands.
That's encouraging to hear. You very much embrace your role as a Black scientist in Canada as well. And I'm just wondering what role you see yourself as having as a Black scientist.
Well, I think that, as a child and a young woman growing up and wanting to be a scientist, I really didn't see many scientists that looked like me. And, I didn't think I had any science teachers or professors or, all of the people I looked up to, none of them, were very diverse. There weren't many women. And so I think that I have, made it my goal to do a lot of outreach and, work with science youth programs to let youth know that it is possible. This work does exist. There are many different scientists in Arctic research, many of whom are diverse, and just to encourage, the next, like a diversity of youth and children to take an interest in the Arctic and climate change.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen that changing in the course of your career?
Yes, I have. In particular, with the recent movements that have taken place over the past year. So, Black Birders Week. There's been Black Mammalogist Week, and also with the groups that I've been a part of or I've participated in, such as the Canadian Girls in Science, Scientists in Schools. I am seeing and Earth Rangers. There is a rich diversity of youth that are taking an interest in climate change, as well as Arctic research as well.
That's great to hear. So, as the newest RCGS Explorer-in-Residence, I'm just wondering what that means to you, or what does it mean to be an explorer in this day and age?
Well, I think it's an amazing honor to be an explorer in residence. I mean, it's quite incredible to be, I've really been very fortunate to have had the opportunity to work across the north in Canada. So, again, Coates Island, the Nunavut Summit region. I also participated in the Victoria Strait expedition, across the Northwest Passage. And so I've seen a lot of amazing places across the Arctic at a time where it's changing so rapidly. And so I think that, one of the goals as an explorer is to, show Canadians, the Arctic, how beautiful it is before it changes, and to generate an interest in Canadians, in particular youth, to care about the Arctic, why it's important, why it is an early warning system for climate change across the world.
My final question is one that I ask all our guests, and it's, what is your favorite place in Canada? Maybe favorite place to be, to unwind, or place you go to in your mind when you need that happy place? Is there a specific spot that sort of is that spot for you?
Well, I think that if I need to go to a happy place, I think about the times I spent on Kendall Island with the families in the north. So it was amazing. During my time there, I participated in many activities with the community members. So I remember every week, or not every week, but once in a while, the communities, when we were at the camps, would organize a baseball on one of the islands, and they'd radio all the other families to join. And these games would typically start around 11 p.m. at night and go till 3 a.m. So, I mean, it was 24 hours of daylight. So
Nice.
we'd typically, be up late playing baseball, but, it was so much fun. So I typically, think back about these moments that I've had at the camps playing baseball.
So Emily, thank you so much for coming on. This has been really lovely.
And you're very welcome. Thank you very much for the invitation. It was fun.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. If you did like it, or just generally enjoyed this podcast and want to help us reach as big an audience as possible, please give us a 5-star rating and write a nice review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. And thank you. And wherever in the world you're listening, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. That's it for this edition of Explore. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, when we'll explore again, I'm David McGuffin.
I think right now we're enjoying very much looking back at the Earth, and it's just a fantastic experience, and I just can't wait to get back and start telling people.
We left Simpson about June the 10th with the Fur Brigade, consisting of a number of yacht boats, each manned by 10 voyageurs.
For us Inuit, it means that Inuit oral history is very strong.
And we flew low over every inch of the country that could be. We were hoping that he would fire at us.
I guess 160